Well, look what the cat dragged in. It's March in the NFL. Lots of news being made across the league. Some of it here in Chicago. That's Kevin Fishbain of The Athletic. I'm Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. Thursday afternoon, big deal went down at Hallis Hall. New general manager Ryan Poles agreeing to trade standout pass rusher Khalil Mack to the Los Angeles Chargers. Gets a second-round pick for next month's draft in return. Also gets a sixth-rounder for 2023. A lot to unpack, a lot to react to. Kevin, where were you the moment that the Khalil Mack trade went down? And be honest, this is an audience that appreciates honesty.
Well, first of all, I thought I was joining the Rich Campbell YouTube channel, so I'm that was very shocking to just turn on my StreamYard and there's Dan Wiederer. Where's Rich? Where's Rich at?
I think he's recovering from Maryland's Big Ten tournament loss last evening. Valiant comeback by the Terrapins, fell a little bit short against Michigan State. Rich isn't the only one that suffered a rough conference tournament loss yesterday.
Yeah, Dan.
So that brings us back to our question: where were you when the Khalil Mack trade broke?
I had just finished watching Northwestern give up more points than any team has ever given up in a Big Ten tournament game, and I was sitting on my couch deciding whether or not to fire off a tweet about the Northwestern men's basketball program over the past 5 seasons. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to fire off a tweet. So it took me some time to collect my thoughts, figure out what I'm going to tweet. I workshopped. I'm sitting there on the couch, and I hit send tweet, and I go, all right, here we go. Here comes the engagement. Here come the Northwestern fans. And boom, 30 seconds later, Adam Schefter, Khalil Mack's been traded.
Yeah. The aforementioned Rich Campbell sent out a screen grab of his Twitter feed, which was your tweet venting about Northwestern basketball, followed by Schefter's tweet announcing the Khalil Mack to LA trade. And this is March in the NFL. People on the outside don't realize that for those of us who cover the league, it is a month where you are on constant edge because things can happen at any second of any day. People always say, isn't the NFL draft harder to cover? And I always say, no chance. The NFL draft is scheduled. It happens between X time on Thursday and X time on Saturday, and you know exactly when your team is picking for the most part. Free agency trades this time of year, it's insane. It can be 11:45 on a Friday night. It can be 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. You just have to be constantly searching, constantly in contact with sources, constantly trying to figure out what balls are in motion.
And this is kind of a new thing, wasn't it? It was there was that Alex Smith trade. I feel like that really got this started. That was 3 years ago. It was such a random January night, and suddenly, even though it wouldn't be official for almost 2 months, and then last year we had the Matthew Stafford and Carson Wentz.
Is a great example.
So all the at least these things happened where we're kind of already on edge and ready for next week. But now teams just don't care about the start of the league year. They're getting all this stuff done, and so Dan you've been doing this slightly longer than me. You're considerably older than me, but I think that my favorite question I get asked is, so what do you do during the off season?
Yep. I get asked that 25 times per year, and my question is, find me the off season, right? Find me the off season. It's really basically a 3-week period in late June, early July, and that's what the NFL offseason is right now. Let's get into the news here, because obviously this is a landmark move that Ryan Poles made in his first 2 months on the job. I'm not sure it's a surprising move that he made, given his assessment of where this football team is. I got a 2-part question for you. First of all, what your feeling is about the trade itself, and secondly, along with that, how you feel about what the Bears got in compensation in return.
I kept wondering if they would be okay with the dead money, right? And the dead money is this kind of weird thing that nobody outside NFL offices, I think, really, truly understands. But what we've seen over the past few years, I mentioned Carson Wentz, is some GMs just don't care. They are going to take on however much dead money it takes to do what's best for the long-term health of the franchise. So I kept sitting there looking at $24 million number, thinking, they're not going to do this. They're going to keep this guy for 1 more year. They're going to be competitive. They know he's going to be a good player if he's healthy, if not an outstanding player if he's healthy. And I just wasn't ready to think that this was going to be a full-on rebuild. And we can get into that. I still don't know if this means it's a full-on rebuild. At least the defense is rebuilding. So that was kind of my overall, once the GM clearly got over the dead money situation, which it probably didn't take him long to get over, then it makes sense. It's this is because because Dan, well, I'll get to your second part, but I'll ask you this question: if Khalil Mack has 12 sacks and 21 quarterback hits and 4 forced fumbles this year, right? And Bears fans are seeing that happen in LA. If he did that in Chicago, like, what's that ceiling? Like, what is that? Like, if he did that, and I feel like that might have been Poles' calculation. Like, if he's great, like, does that mean? Because there's too many questions on offense for you to say a great Khalil Mack means we're going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, and that's what this entire conversation is about for Ryan Poles. I give him a lot of credit for seeing this entire situation through clear eyes, no emotions attached, not trying to provide wishful thinking into decisions that require critical thinking and objectivity, right? And Ryan Poles impressed the Chicago Bears search committee in part because of his candor, because he told them what he thought they should be seeing when they look in the mirror. And for some reason that resonated with the folks on the search committee, which I think is a positive thing for the Bears, because for too long they've looked in that mirror and it's been like a funhouse mirror. They think they're taller than they are. They think they're better looking than they, it's just like they don't really know what they're seeing in the reflection. And Ryan Poles basically has looked at this roster. He's looked at the reason that this team was 6-11 and needed to get rid of their general manager, get rid of their coach, get rid of their entire coaching staff. And he said, listen, this is a organization and a roster that needs a lot of help and a lot of work. And the roster needs a lot of work. And to your point, you can talk about this with the big R word. That's the one that people like to throw around, rebuild. I like to say it's a transition year. And it's going to be a dull transition year in a lot of ways, because it's just, they are strapped, right? They don't have a lot of draft capital. They don't have a lot of extra money to spend in free agency. And so they've got to go about filling these holes without a lot of resources. Well, one thing that Ryan Poles did with this trade is he got himself an opportunity with another day 2 pick in next month's draft to get Justin Fields more help. We're going to see where this all lands. We're going to get to May 1st, and we're going to see what Poles did in free agency in the draft, and we're going to see what it looks like. But the number one goal for this organization should be getting Justin Fields help, so that when this roster starts to come together around him, he's already on that on-ramp to the express lanes.
Yeah, I mean, once I saw second round pick, you nod. It's like, okay, it makes sense. You got, like, that is such a top 50 pick, is so crucial for a team that had like the least amount of draft capital outside the Rams and maybe two other teams. When I first looked at it, okay, maybe could they've gotten a second and a fourth, or a second and a fifth? But in the end, I mean, like, fourth, fifth, sixth rounders, and NFL scouts who do this for a living might disagree, but like, it gets to be such a crapshoot when you get. You're
picking from the same piles, right?
I mean, look, Darnell Mooney, who's a 5th round pick, is right now a foundational piece of this roster, and there were people who thought they overdrafted him. Yeah. So like, that's just what happens when you get to that day 3, and just the fact that the Bears don't have to pay any more money to Khalil Mack, which is one of those things I think fans worry about more than the teams do. Yeah. Like, if they did, like, so what? They have the money, but they don't have to. So I think it works out, the draft, getting that second round pick. I mean, again, as you said, 2 top 50 picks, they can get a starting wide receiver, a starting offensive tackle, or a starting receiver, or starting guard. Right? Yeah. Like, they could starting center, starting receiver, and they could be all, and as you said, transition year. Because to me, the difference, and I feel like all of us are trying to figure out how to not always compare this to Ryan Pace in 2015, but I'm going to compare it to Ryan Pace in 2015.
Fair.
Which is, I think Ryan Pace, it was Brandon Marshall, right? That was a big trade when Ryan Pace got here. And then there was more. There was Jared Allen, John Bostic, eventually Martellus Bennett the next year. But Brandon Marshall was the big one. But when Ryan Pace did that, he had no choice but to try to build around Jay Cutler.
Right.
Like, he was saddled with Jay. Now it's like such this focus on Fields, and you have a direction to go, and you can do everything you can this offseason to make sure, because right now, Dan, I think this is figuring out what you have in Fields this year. And then when next year comes and you have all this draft capital, $100+ million in cap space, then you know how to attack.
Well, and Ryan Poles told us at the Combine that, look, he's looking for that dependability piece for Justin Fields, a guy who he can go to in big moments, who he trusts and can develop that chemistry with. So now you get an extra opportunity to do that. On the draft compensation side of things, I personally would have liked to see them get that second pick, the 6th rounder, for this year. It seems a little bit of a frustrating situation to have to wait to 2023 to be able to spend that, but Ryan Poles was obviously content with that. Other than that, you're talking about Khalil Mack, who's really 3+ years removed from his peak with the Bears. Obviously finished last season on IR, has been hurt for most of the last 2 seasons. He's in his 30s, probably on the downside of his career. Maybe he gets a jump start by reuniting with Brandon Staley in Los Angeles. Brandon Staley, remember, is one of the first people that welcomed Khalil Mack to Hallis Hall in 2018 and got him on the ground and running. So that relationship is built in. It's pre-made. And that's a good thing for the Chargers to go with. This whole concept of where the Bears are, I think, is important to address, because I think Ryan Poles, from the day he got here, has been pretty honest with what he can say and what he can insinuate and hint at in terms of his evaluation of this roster. And his evaluation of this roster is there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so why are we going to go trick ourselves into feeling like we can contend for the 7th seed in the NFC, and that's going to mean something because we can get there? He's looking beyond 2022, and he's trying to figure out, how can we build a roster that can do what the Chiefs did in Kansas City and be a perennial player and be in the contention for division championships and deep playoff runs and Super Bowl runs for multiple years in a row. Kev, we've talked about this a lot. The Bears have not had 3 consecutive winning seasons since the late 80s. I don't know. Were you born then?
Yes.
Just about. Young kid crawling around. I was born then. It's a long time, in other words. And so you have to try to build something that's sustainable rather than these quick flashes and regroup. Quick flash and start over. Quick flash and everybody goes. And so to his credit, I think he's come into this situation, seen it with clear eyes, realized that, hey, we've got pieces that we can get value on right now. Let's set up a table at the flea market. That's what I wrote in my column for this morning. And just see what people are willing to pay, right? And then adjust from there. And if they give you something that can give you, draft capital to go out and build your next championship contending team, take it, roll with it, and don't look back.
Yeah, I mean, how many untouchables do the Bears have right now? Like
2?
3?
Yeah.
Like I mean,
Fields, Roquan.
Yeah, you know what? Like if somebody, I shouldn't. I was gonna say, if somebody wanted to offer a 1st-round pick for Roquan Smith, like you'd have to sit there and think about it for a second. But I don't think anybody would do that. But yeah, Roquan, Justin Fields, Mooney, maybe. I don't even know if Jalen Johnson is an untouchable. But so you have so much room to figure this out. And he said it. Ryan Pace said it, but didn't necessarily do it. Ryan Poles wants to build this team through the draft. And he goes, there's ways to get more draft picks. Now they have 6. I mean, I'm sure he would like to have like 8 by the time the draft is over. Because you go through, because he's got to look at Ryan Pace's draft picks, right? And say, all right, which of these guys is part of this? So you said Mooney, you got Roquan, you got Fields, you got Jalen Johnson, maybe Cole Kmet. One of those offensive linemen, you hope, but you just don't know.
Right.
I mean,
You just let's say that you get into that second day of the draft and you see the ability to move back a little bit, right? To your point of wanting to maybe have 8 by the time it's over. How can we add to this draft class to have more swings at guys that can be difference makers for us? Maybe now, because you've got, 39 and 48, and I think 71 is the 3rd round pick, you can manipulate that board a little bit and slide around a little bit, still get guys you want, and add a day 3 pick that then ultimately becomes one of these diamond in the rough attempts to turn into a gem, So we'll see where he takes it for sure.
I like to think of it as, I mean, the Cubs rebuild was a full rebuild, right? So it's obviously a different situation and different sports, etc. But Theo's strategy was, we're going to take as many cracks at this as we can. And if 4 or 5 of these guys work out, we're in good shape. All of them worked out pretty much, and we saw what happened. So I feel like that's got to be, for an NFL GM like Ryan Poles, it's like, we got to take so many different cracks at guys. Like, we need to find 10 Darnell Mooneys, like what Ryan Pace found in Mooney. And then in free agency, you got to find a few Akeem Hickses. You got to find these 2nd wave, 3rd wave guys that become something great. And like, you got to keep just, take swings. And some of them, there's going to be busts. There's going to be guys that just totally don't work out. They hope it's not a Kevin White-esque bust, obviously. But that's what the next, I guess it starts next week and then it goes into the end of April. It's, there's going to be 10 to 20 brand new players who are not just going to be brand new, but they're going to be guys who are expected to contribute right away. And then at the end of 22, you see which of those guys is actually good. And then you kind of do it again.
No question.
But it's funny, Dave, because I feel like we talk about all this stuff and I don't know, you know me, Dan, it's mock draft season. And you know how much I love mock draft
season. How much I love mock draft season.
And we're doing these. I'm excited that they have another pick for the draft. It makes it more interesting. But sometimes I just stop myself and I say, it's all about Fields, right? It's just like there's so much that Poles needs to do, and I want to see Luke Getsy's offense, and I want to learn more about Luke Getsy, and you want to learn more about the guys they're going to bring in. But like every little thing you talk about just comes back to Fields. Like if he is who Ryan Pace thought he was, then it changes the calculation of what Ryan Poles needs to do. But unfortunately, Ryan Poles has no idea yet at this point if Justin Fields can be that guy.
No. And imagine if the Bears had surrounded a championship level defense with a franchise quarterback back around the time when they acquired Khalil Mack, and how much that window of opportunity might have extended beyond just the one season, 12-4.
I could think of a certain CBS Sports Twitter account that might disagree with you, my friend.
We'll get to that in another episode. Don't worry. I'm not letting you get out of that chair without talking about that. But one last question as we close the book on the Khalil Mack era. You remember the adrenaline surge that went through this city on Labor Day weekend 2018 when the news broke early in the morning that Ryan Pace had pulled off the trade to bring Khalil Mack here. It was a surprise deal that made me ultimately have to go down to State Street studio at ESPN 1000 and do a show with my shirt off because I thought there was going to be no Khalil Mack trade to Chicago. But Khalil Mack was the blowtorch that lit the wick for everything that happened for the Chicago Bears in 2018. He turned that defense into a group that believed it was the best in the league and played like it was the best in the league. He was phenomenally productive in the first month of his time as a Bears. He was phenomenally productive through most of that 2018 season. The last 3 years, not so much. And so there's this very weird sort of, back and forth that you have in your own head with folks that want to ask about it is, what is the Khalil Mack era in Chicago really remembered for? It's a really promising division championship run in 2018 that opened the door, but then the door closed shut and Khalil was hurt and he never got there. The Bears remember, if you remember, the day that they traded for Khalil Mack and signed him to the extension was the day after Aaron Donald became the highest paid defensive player in NFL history, and Max Steele topped that, right? Ryan Pace paid Khalil Mack to be the best defensive player in the NFL. He wasn't. He was really, really good at times. He was never the every week, every series star that the Bears thought he could become for them. And so that leaves you on his way out going, in Khalil's own words, Kevin, a dog that poop fast don't poop for long.
Don't I know it, Dan? I mean, it's and I feel like if we're going to compare to Julius Peppers a little bit, different points of their career. But I just feel like there was a bit more of an understanding with Pep as he got to his end of his time in Chicago, like where he was at. Like there wasn't I feel like there was a lot of vitriol towards Khalil Mack the past couple of years that wasn't here for Peppers, and because people wanted Aaron Donald, like they wanted 2018 Khalil Mack production, and I don't blame them. He was getting paid to do that. He didn't, and I would always bring up the injuries because I you can't talk about him without mentioning that he was on the injury report every day of 2020, yeah, and started every game. And last year we saw what happened with the foot injury. Like he was playing hurt, but and then they'd the coach always say double teams, triple teams, but then you kind of step back and be like, Khalil Mack, it shouldn't matter all the time. Like he should still find a way to make that one impact play a game. And there were just too many games. I always think back to London, Dan. I mean, didn't he actually end up getting like the a fumble? Like there was like the weird play with Derek Carr.
Yeah.
Where he ended up getting, I don't know if it was like a fumble recovery.
It was like a bad snap, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but other than that, like the Raiders game plan to take him out of that game. And they did. And then he didn't, and like that was kind of a turning point, I feel, for the whole franchise a little bit, that game, that trip, but also for Khalil Mack, because you knew how much he wanted to win that game himself. And they took him out of it. And that kind of gave you a sense that like there are going to be teams that can do that. So it's a weird legacy, because I think that like if 2018 happened in his second or third year, it's different. But it happened his first year, you said his first month.
Right.
Was his greatest memories. He was NFL, he was defensive player of the month in September.
I mean, it was such an explosion, right? Because listen, this wasn't a trade made in March where you had this buildup. It was like, oh, Labor Day weekend, Khalil Mack's a Bear. Oh, 7 days later, he's on Sunday Night Football making Deshaun Kaiser look like a fool, on primetime. Oh, 2 weeks later, he's in Arizona winning the game with a strip sack of Sam Bradford. And I never forget that, because I remember the players in the locker room talking with him with such high regard, and Prince Amukamara and Danny Trevathan, and Prince saying that look, he's like LeBron James, not just in his skill set, but in the way that he makes everyone around him feel like, oh man, it's time. Like, we're going to win, and Khalil's going to be the reason we win, and he's so awesome. And then it didn't sustain beyond 2018. I think it did sustain that season, because if you recall, the division championship clinching win against the Packers in Soldier Field, that was an electric day by the lakefront that people forget 3 years later. It's hard, because Aaron Donald's just got himself a ring, right? Like, he just got himself that ring on his finger. He made the play that won that ring in the fourth quarter, the final minute of the Super Bowl. He's been on a winning team every single year since signing that massive extension. He was an All-Pro all those years. It's just different, and I think it's a little bit of a disappointment on the way out for Khalil. And as you know, Khalil didn't necessarily enjoy, not necessarily, he didn't enjoy the spotlight, and actually ran from it a lot, away from the field. And I'm not sure if that contributed to anything here, but it may contribute to some of the stuff that you mentioned, which is sort of that vitriol of people feeling like they didn't get the full Khalil Mack experience that they thought they were going to get.
Yeah, and I mean, so much of it goes to that 2018 just thrill ride that the Bears put everybody on, that he engineered. As you said, he lifted everybody else around him. And I just...
Including Matt Nagy.
Yes. I think, now I will say, you can look back, if he gets that 2-point conversion catch in the playoff game, that could change his legacy. It could change a lot of things. I think, like, I always enjoyed when Khalil Mack talked to us, and it was few and far between. But you asked them the right question. It usually had to be about an opponent or another player or a coach. Like, it was your question to him about Brandon Staley that he kind of like lit up from last August about how much he appreciates Staley. It was a
random question, and in retrospect, it was so brilliant,
Of course, you foresight. But yeah, because obviously you and I both know there are some fans that don't care about how often a guy talks to the media. If you go get the job done in the field,
fans.
Yeah, that's fine, and I get that. But this city just didn't really get to know the guy, and maybe that had something to do with the way they didn't appreciate him as much. But Dan, it also just goes back to, I say this about Roquan Smith a lot, because Roquan's last 2 years, I think, have been outstanding on the field, off the field. Like, he's been a leader for this team. He's been so good on the field. Nationally, just like nobody cares about Roquan Smith, because the Bears have been just such a joke. And for Khalil Mack, for the Bears to be as disappointing as they were the last 3 years, like, how could he, like, it almost didn't even matter if he was good, because he did put up decent numbers in 19 and 20, but just the team was just so mediocre. Like, he ended up being a bit of a punching bag for, like, well, if he's putting up 15 sacks, maybe we're not in this situation.
Right. Well, and also, look, this league now is about guys who score touchdowns and put the quarterback on the ground and take the ball away. And Roquan Smith, as good as he is, isn't in the highlight reel for those things very often. We'll have a lot more to talk about this. We've got a lot more ground to cover. Don't go anywhere. That wraps up this episode, but we're going to talk a little bit more on the next episode about the Bears free agency hunt and some of the Bears related storylines that will be circulating through free agency. Stick around with us for that. Always like the video, subscribe to this channel. That's Kevin Fishbain. I'm Dan Wiederer. We'll talk to you soon.